It's wonderful to have so many people here, and I'm going to let our curator, Andrew Lazat, talk to you a little bit about the exhibit.
George graduated from the Cleveland Institute of Art in 1982 and then traveled for 4 months where his visual art experience translated into various opportunities to make a contribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bundy. First off, I'd like to thank the museum for this great opportunity. So what I'm going to present today is actually not about my work. It's about digital art and contemporary art and how artists use some of the new tools. The irony of what I'm doing, talking about this, is that I'm very much a Luddite, so I didn't really touch the computer until maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, so it's full of irony that I'm talking about computers and digital art. I'm a very informal presenter, so if along the way somebody has a question, please don't hesitate to just yell out that, "What are you babbling about?" and I'll be sure to confuse the issue further. So the digital realm. Let's see how this works. All right, it works. All right, so obviously digital tools permeate our lives today. So I need to hone it down in terms of what I'm talking about when I talk about artists. So I'm not talking about the applied arts. So for example, in the world of illustration, digital tools, Photoshop to all kinds of graphic design tools, have been a part of the industry for a long time. What I'm going to be talking about mostly is the fine art, where artists in the last century are solving art problems. They're not solving applied arts problems. So they're interested in their own ideas about what they want to pursue as far as themes reflecting on society and culture and art itself. Artists in general are innovators. You know, you, as somebody who makes things and develops new ideas, you're by that nature going to innovate. You're going to pay attention to what new ideas other people have and see what they want to, see what you can apply. So innovators build on what's already been done. So they may not necessarily be the technologists, the people that are coming up with new apps and new so on and so forth tools themselves, but they're going to be early on finding those and saying, oh, I can do this with that. They like to experiment. You know, what if? So there's an element of the art world that's very much like science, where you develop a hypothesis and you kind of create a series of works to explore that hypothesis. So there's this kind of exploration that happens in the visual art medium of artists defining their own problems in the art vocabulary and going through steps solving them and using different tools to solve them. They are also generally early adopters, which is a phrase that has been used a lot in technology of our society. There's people that get the brand new phone or had the first watch or whatever that comes out, and so those are the early adopters, and they're the people that actually help technology move forward really quickly. So artists are all of the above in that regard. When I say artists, that runs the gamut in terms of painters, drawers, sculptors. What am I talking about? There is, in contemporary art today, very few people will define themselves as, let's say, a painter. The categories are much more broad, and they don't have hard edges. So somebody who paints might be doing a performance tomorrow or a sculpture. So the boundaries are a little bit blurrier than they used to be in the past. But that's also our perception of the past, because we think of, let's say, a Michelangelo as a sculptor. Well, yeah, but he also painted that ceiling. What was that? Oh, yeah, Sistine Chapel. He was also an architect. Art, throughout centuries, artists have been not sticking to one thing. They just become known for one thing sometimes, but they cross borders. The pioneers in the last half century, let's say, are people that have already been involved with exploring technologies. A lot of people that do photo-based work. And people used to think of photography as a medium that, oh, well, that's photography, that's not art. But the last century, and certainly the last 30 years, that's become a pretty established medium, and most museums will have photography shows or artists that do photography-based works. Video. You know, video was something that, well, you always had filmmakers, or not always, past century or whatever, But when video technology emerged, you had artists starting to think about, well, let's just not do traditional storytelling. Let's see what else we can do with this medium. Sculptors, they are always using a variety of materials. In the old days, it might have been bronze or stone or whatever, things that had a permanence. Today, anything goes, to the point where sculpture transitions into installation, to where artists are not only making objects that are discrete objects, but will define a space by virtue of putting many objects in the space, which is referred to as installation art. And then lastly, performance. Things that are time-based. Anything that's a performance-based work usually needs to be documented, which ties together with video. All of these elements kind of come together. There's no lines between them, and the digital tools to explore these things have enabled artists and empowered them to do a greater variety of work. Nam June Paik. He's one of the early adopters of technology, primarily video art. And now we're going back pretty much 50 years. He decided that the video medium itself kind of was a reflection of society, the whole kinetic aspect, the fast-moving pictures, the fact that you can document something on a video so it has a time quality of when it was documented, but then at the same time, you're seeing it now. And this is a little blurb from the Smithsonian show that he did a year or two ago. Let me share that with you.
This is a glimpse of a video landscape of tomorrow, when you will be able to switch to any TV station on the earth, and TV guides will be as fat as the Manhattan telephone book. An artist of the first rank. The George Washington of video art.
So that's just a little teaser of the kinds of things that he did. He would make the videos, he would create these installations, and they were reflective of the, in a sense, chaos that he saw as part of our society. He was using these tools to make social commentary, that some of which brought together history as well as current technology. So clearly there's a dialogue that takes place between old and new. And you see that with a lot of the artists, where they're using the new tools to reflect on either universal truths or ideas of contemporary society. A lot of his installations are massive. They're multi-screen endeavors that are formatted so that you have one image on several screens and so on that are coordinated. David Hockney, landscape painter. He's done traditional work, or what might be considered traditional work, for decades. You know, a drawer painter, you know, in the old world sense. But, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, he started playing around with the tools. One of the things that fascinated him, as well as some other artists, is that when you're in front of the computer screen, it glows. So when you're making artwork, and you're painting on a canvas or a piece of paper, you need an external light source to shine on it to illuminate it. When you're working on a computer screen, you don't. It's got an internal light source, so it actually makes images glow more. And so I think he was fascinated by that. They started making paintings on iPads, tablets. I mean, there's a number of tools that have become available to artists and anybody else for that matter. He would also sometimes display the iPads themselves, so you'd have basically glowing images on the gallery walls. There's a picture of him in front of one of his pieces. So he's able to bridge the old world image making of traditional painting, traditional ideas of landscape, but use the new tools to build that bridge. This is one of the examples of like an iPad, which, so, you know, this small, and you're basically drawing and painting as if it were a canvas. The tools allow you to develop different programs. There's oil painting, watercolor, drawing, so you can actually create whatever kind of feel you want with it. They're traditional, but what he's using is not a traditional medium. Casey Rias. A lot of the artists are technologists in their own right, where they've learned to do the programming, where they do the design of the software to get them to do what they want. They're fascinated by the idea of human action, but then as through a filter of the technology, so that the technology itself is, in a sense, solving the aesthetic problem. They're doing the programming, computer, in a sense, is generating the image. So consequently, he doesn't know exactly what he's going to be getting until the computer spits it out. It's basically playing with pixels and digital zeros and ones to create images. So there's an unpredictability aspect to that, which in a sense, by using the technology, it becomes a commentary of the unpredictable nature of technology. The other aspect of what he does is kind of fascinating because it ties in with biology. There's things that happen in the natural world, whether it's fractals, whether there's a logic of things building, the golden ratio of proportion. These are things that happen in the world of biology and DNA and the growth of plants and animals. Think like a nautilus shell, the proportions of how it grows and changes. Well, he uses some of that kind of programming in the computer software to generate images. Consequently, his images, even though it's all technical, they have very much an organic quality. It feels like either plant or crystal or structures that have an inherent form that ties it to the real world in terms of biology. The other aspect of work that, just like we saw with Namjoon Pak, is what you're displaying. The times of putting up a drawing, putting up a painting or a sculpture, that's still current, that still happens today. But at the same time, other possibilities exist. Sculptures with light, sculptures that have illumination, like David Hockney's screens. So that enables different things to be created that change the conversation. So throughout the years, throughout the centuries, art to a great extent is always a reflection of the medium it's made in. For example, a drawing has kind of a more direct quality than a painting, because many times you have a sense of the process where you can kind of see the engagement of the artist, especially if there's construction lines in terms of how a drawing formed. So it gives you a little bit more of a connection to that artist. Paintings may be a little bit more polished. The medium that an artist chooses, it becomes a part of the vocabulary on best ways to express that idea. Thus you can kind of see the technical structure of how he's literally and figuratively building his images. JR, who only goes by JR. One of the things that has exploded as well is not only the tools to make images, but also the tools on how to disseminate images and how to print images. Because of the computers, we can print things huge. Street art, you know, he's a street artist, he's a graffiti artist. But he's taking these images and plastering them all over the world. And for him, he has this conceptual idea of it being about people, about everyday people, and the direct communication of putting up something on a building or on a street has a direct communication that kind of bypasses the gallery and the museum world. It's a direct communication with an audience. Whether the audience wants it or not is a different issue, but it's there. We have a little short video of his too. Pretty cool project. these are basically paper panels that are wheat pasted into place. He figures out the design, in this case has a team of people, they're literally plastering it down on the ground, and there it is, and it's a temporary thing. And that's one of the other dichotomies that's fascinating about a lot of contemporary art that's playing with the digital medium, is that digital has this oxymoronic aspect of being both permanent and very impermanent at the same time. The digital file theoretically lasts forever, doesn't break down, and so on and so forth. By the same token, as a society, we're generating so much digital content that it's like, oh, that was 10 minutes ago, that's old. There's that transient, temporary aspect of it. So, for example, this guy's making work that is meant to be temporary. It's not like sculptors of years past that say, okay, I'm going to make a monumental sculpture, it's going to be on this town square, you know, for generations. No, these are meant to be momentary things that engage a community at that segment of time for weeks or months or whatever, and then it's gone. So there's an ephemeral quality to it.
George, what was that made of?
These are all basically, for all of them, they're paper and they're wheat pasted onto a wall. So they're meant to be impermanent. So, you know, after time, they peel off, they disintegrate unless he takes them down. And this is also part of the street art ethos. Street art, graffiti has been around going back to Roman times, or probably earlier if you want to consider the cave paintings from 40,000 years ago. And at different points in time, society feels one way or the other about them. It depends on what they look like, depends how they're done, depends where they're done. You know, nobody wants a bunch of street urchins coming to your house tagging it with spray paint, right? At the same time, there's a lot of creative people that find their voice on the street. He's one of them. Of course, he's built it into an international following. So he gets commissioned by, well, that video was New York Times and, you know, museums and so on and so forth. Well, there too, there's kind of a dichotomy in the sense that here's a street artist, anti-establishment, yeah, screw the man, and at the same time, like, you get commissioned by the man to do something, so. That's one of his projects, I think, somewhere in South America. These are rooftops, so it's kind of hard to see. All of his work focuses on people, faces, eyes, things that make us universal. So it's not necessarily about the individual identity of any of these people. It's more a reflection of humanity. We got another video for you. Jamie Ziegelbaum. I had mentioned working with light. Which brings up another point, interactivity. In the old days, an artist would make an object. The object would be put on the wall if it made it out of the studio, and people would view it. There was no direct interaction. The artist would communicate an idea visually. The audience would interpret that idea, sometimes accurately, sometimes we all bring our own stories to the table when we look at art. Well, we always do. But as that video showed, that's actually asking the audience to do more, or allowing the audience to do more, to where you're actually interacting with the work, in a sense, becoming a partner with the artist and creating work. One of the things that video artists have done in the past too is kind of broadcast the fact that they're playing with the technology and using the technology. So this whole tangle of wires becomes a part of the image. And one of the things that our past 50 or more years has become interested in the making of art is the process of making art. There's this demystification that happens where the process of creativity, how an artist arrives from the idea, the initial idea of A, and to the process of execution, is something that we're much more comfortable with today than we were 100 or 500 years ago, where the process of how something occurs, in a sense, was hidden. They were more interested in the mystery, the magic of here it is, it's done. And so, in a sense, this gives indications of how something occurs. A.L. Giver. Here he's taking films of people engaged in an activity and creating a sculpture out of it. So in that case, it was both a video as well as creating a sculpture. These are 3D printed, which is also a new technology, past 5-10 years, that's exploded. And that's going to be finding applications in our lives in ways that we have no idea, from bodily organs to architecture to everything. And of course, artists are paying attention. I saw a great 3D print show, and architects, designers, artists, they're all playing with what's possible with this new technology. So things that how would you sculpt that? Now you can print in 3D and create an object that would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to create beforehand. And it's also, the irony of it too is that it's new technology, it's 3D printing. By the same token, it's things that we all recognize, the spilling liquid. It's almost prosaic in what it is, but by virtue of scale and technology, it becomes something else. Raphael Rosendahl. He uses lenticular technology, which isn't necessarily digital. It's a printing technology, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but basically it has a dimensional surface, like ridges. So if you're looking at it from one angle, it looks one way. If you look at it from another angle, it looks another way. What this allows him to do is he creates these abstractions that, as you see on the video, that seem to shift colors. They seem to not stay in one place. Here he's making something it's a still object, it's a still image, but by virtue of your movement, by your eye moving back and forth across it, it changes. This too, kind of like the light one, there's a reflection of the audience, the interactivity between you and the work. So lenticular technology, basically you have 1, 2, 3, or whatever number of images, and then you have a plastic film on top of it that's ridged. It basically creates a different way of seeing 1 or 2 images depending on your viewpoint. Great sound effect. He also does projections, and that's something that artists have been doing a lot in the last 20, 30 years, where they take the idea of video, but instead of projecting it, let's say, just on a screen, they combine it with the idea of installation so that they utilize the whole room and to create an environment. Consequently, in a sense, you can have a similar idea or one idea that finds a variety of expressions that's dependent on the space. Mark Kugala does these very short films. He's combining what we recognize as realistic objects, real things, but he's creating a sense of mystery and a sense of non-reality with these short, they're like, whatever, 20-second films. Creating objects that don't exist, but you feel like they might or they should or they could. So there's a sense of surrealness to what he's doing. Young Lang. Well, this looks, for all intents and purposes, like a very traditional Japanese screen, Chinese screen. I had mentioned earlier how many artists are going back in time to make reference to their culture or to art history or whatever, and then pulling it into the current century or current explorations. So this is one of them where he's taking specific ideas from Chinese culture and reflecting upon it. All of his images are derived from these tiny fragments of urban scenes, construction sites to buildings to whatever. So he's composing these gigantic landscapes, and from a distance they look like traditional Chinese screens. When you come up close to them, it's, oh my God, you know, they're full of all these little things. So you can find all these elements that are completely unexpected and don't necessarily relate to the idyllic landscape that you think you're looking at. So it becomes a kind of a statement on overpopulation, Chinese culture, and so on. A lot of his work is also very large, so I had the opportunity to see a number of his pieces both in Chicago and New York, and he'll have a piece like this that's printed on paper, and this might be 16 by 24 feet or something like that. You walk into a room and you're struck by the beauty of the traditional work, and then you go up close and you see that these are skyscrapers and they're not trees, they're electrical towers and construction cranes and so on and so forth. So it becomes this much more revealing thing that you discover on seeing it. He also did like a traditional scroll that was, I don't know, 3 feet by 100 feet that was displayed in the museum, just like traditional Chinese scrolls might be from ancient times. This is a great example of a guy using current technology in a way that only could be done today, but reflecting on a culture of the past. He was a part of a show called Ink at the Metropolitan Museum of Art a couple years ago, which was a tremendous show. Titus Ora, who happens to be a Hungarian guy, is playing with programming, but he's also very interested in the seduction of the image, the aesthetic. Artists become interested in different aspects of why make an image. What is the reason to create an image? And the idea of aesthetics, the idea of beauty and things like that go back hundreds or thousands of years. And many times in contemporary art, that's not one of the criteria. You know, it's like artists may or may not be interested in the idea of beauty. This guy is, but at the same time, he's interested in the programming and how do you create something that is beautiful or interesting with the contemporary tools. He's also interested in the idea of the vulnerabilities of the tools. What he's doing with these is he's programming mistakes into the computer called glitches. So you have a section like this or a section like this, which is like a contrived error. And so consequently, he's playing with the idea of aesthetic perfection with mistakes built in. It's a part of the same series. There's this fascination with the idea of, okay, here's a perfection, here's a perfect thing or a relatively perfect thing, but it's vulnerable. Here he's taking kind of traditional portrait image and the idea of a series of bumblebees. And he's very interested in pattern in terms of he can create patterns digitally that would be a little bit more challenging to do by hand as well as really tedious. There's all these formal elements in the cross, the cruciform shape. There's also elements of environmental statement in terms of honey, the DNA or viral patterns and images. Bees, for those of you who don't know, have been very vulnerable this past 5 or 6 years. There's colony collapse disorder where it's like a viral thing that's decimating the honeybee population. So he's bringing all kinds of reference points to the table with his work. Jaume Plenza does tremendous work, real shy guy. Had the opportunity to meet him a number of years ago. He's been doing work all over the world. And he's one of the few people that explores the figure with his work. So we think of the computer technology as kind of a cold thing. It's an inhuman thing. It's, you know, there's a distance between us as human beings, the humanist element, and the tools, the technology. He wants to eliminate that distance, so all of his work is figural. It's also about archetypes, about universal, which in that sense he's got in common with JR, where it's not about specific people, it's about the archetype of people and humanity. He's playing with distorting the figure. by distorting it, he's making reference to the technology, but he's also making it less of a specific person because it's distorted. I think he ends up doing cast concrete. So he's got these heads all over the world. This one's actually hard to see, but what he does is going for that universally. So it's a hand in blessing, is what you're seeing. But then he uses letters from a variety of cultures. So he's trying to make that a universal blessing, not a specific to any particular nationality or faith. I think there's the one in Chicago. So this is, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 feet. You can see people in the background there. And it has a certain softness, so it has this tranquility and a human element that refers more to, like, let's say, old Buddhas of time immemorial, even though he's using the modern technology, contemporary technology to do it. Richard Prince, there's one of those artists that artists love to hate, and personally I'm not a big fan either. But what's relevant is that he's using digital technology, but he's also using the technology that other people use at the same time. So what these are images printed on canvas that other people have created. So there's things like Facebook, things like Instagram, things like Twitter that many people use all the time on a daily basis. He goes and gets on Instagram and he basically steals images from people, writes some of his own little blurbs on them, prints them big, and there you go. So in a sense, he's appropriating art, which artists have been doing forever, but it's also kind of a pop culture thing, which goes back to pop art from the 1960s, like Andy Warhol and things like that, that were directly referring to pop culture. So he's using the tools of the technology and reflecting on the same tools that others are using all the time. Instagram, for those that you don't know, is basically, it's an image sharing network. So anybody can open an Instagram account. It comes with an app on your phone, and whatever photos you take, you can just share on any given day. So the tools are also not only enabling like artists that are active in the art world, but it empowers everybody from, you know, your grade school kids to whatever to create images.
But aren't you violating copyright laws?
This guy's always in lawsuits, you know. So he's getting sued left and right. There's other people like Jeff Koons that are also appropriating images, twisting it a little bit, making it their own, and then getting sued. They all happen to be pretty big artists, so the lawsuits actually just generate more PR for them, so they probably revel in the attention. Copyright is still trying to keep up with the whole digital realm. You know, today you can pirate anything, you can, you know, anything that's online is free, you know, pretty much. So even though it might be copyright, it might be trademarked, and so on and so forth, but it's a mixed blessing of the availability of images. There's the irony of the photo of somebody taking a photo, one of his photos, which came from a photo that somebody else took, and I am talking too much. Believe me, we're near the end.
The end is near.
The end is near. Repent. So the tools, they allow you to make new things, but they also allow you to communicate in ways that were not available to people before. Consequently, what I just mentioned, Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, any one of us can basically, you know, post a picture of our breakfast and share it with others. Now, a lot of that is just kind of banal things like, okay, I really don't care what you had for breakfast. I wasn't there, I didn't eat any of it, so I'm actually angry about it. But the sharing idea is incredible, because art, after all, is a medium of communication. You know, most artists want to communicate their ideas with the world. You know, you make your object, whatever it is, traditional or not, and it's an idea that you want to share with somebody. So the contemporary tools allow that in ways that are absolutely unprecedented. Also included my friend Guy Vincent, who happens to be sitting right here. He is one of the artists that uses the technology to create work that couldn't have been created otherwise, and then using the same technology to communicate the work. He does work with Twitter, and Twitter symbols are symbols that are letters of a variety of languages. He basically deconstructs those symbols, puts them back together in completely different ways. So they're non-verbal cues, but they look like they are. And so he's creating images with these, and then on a daily basis, putting them out on Twitter, sending them around the world. So here you're taking something that didn't exist before in terms of the tools, disassembling it, putting it back together, and then immediately sharing it with the rest of the world. This might be an example of what it looks like on his Twitter feed on a phone. People can follow him and look at the images that he's generating on a daily basis. They also have kind of a fascination in the sense that they look like they should have meaning. So it becomes kind of a reflection on the nature of communication itself, where when we look at another language, we can't read it, but we know it's communication. We know that somebody else can read it. There's this universal component of communication that we're actually hardwired with, science is showing. By the same token, he likes to make objects. So back to that dichotomy of ephemeral, of things that are temporary and only exist in the digital realm, versus things that are concrete, that can be manifested. And this is also one of those examples of old and new. Here we have images that are of a historical nature, but they have the contemporary aspect of the symbols on top of them. So it's that bridging, it's that building a bridge between the old and the new. These are large prints on paper. By large, I mean like 7 feet or so. So you have these traditional images, and by virtue of these symbols, the context of these images become redefined. These are mixed media works, so there's paint on them and gold leaf and a variety of materials, as well as the symbols themselves. Some of the symbols are printed, others are hand-drawn, so he's playing all kinds of games. And last and least, me, which I tossed myself in here just to give myself an opportunity to talk about me. I'm not a digital artist, so really I don't even belong in this category at all. So my explorations on the digital realm are very limited. What I'm doing with it is basically using photography and using Photoshop to play with images. The things that I personally have always relied on, I've always relied on my drawing skills to make images. And the challenge for any artist is to build on what you know how to do, but at the same time, you don't want to like just repeat. You want to grow, you want to explore new ground. And to that end, I decided, okay, I hate computers. I just hate everything about it. I want to get messy in the studio. So, okay, let's torment yourself. Let's do something you're not allowed to draw, not allowed to get dirty, and make art. This gives you an idea a little bit about the process of how I do it. I start out with topographical maps. Bundy had mentioned, the years of scouting. Well, God knows how many hikes we've taken, and we're rolling out the topographical map, trying to figure things out. So maps and reading topography has kind of been a part of my life for a long time. The digital tools that are available now, when you go online, you can download any map from anywhere, any kind of map. This kind of indicates more the satellite image of topography versus printed, drawn topography. These are both screenshots, so you can see the whole computer screen and what tabs I have open if you're really perversely curious. I use that to create the images. And then I find the image from my own files of places I've hiked or climbed or whatever, and I correlate that with a map that I'm using. Then basically through a series of manipulating the images, combining them, creating transparencies, and layer upon layer of playing with it, I end up with whatever image that I'm looking for. So that's what you're seeing here is what I have some of on the wall. They're singular works, so theoretically, once you create something digitally, you could hit print and print thousands of them. I'm not really interested in doing that, because the way I look at it is that the creativity for me is in solving the problem once. I've solved the problem, I want to share the solution to the problem with everybody, but I'm not necessarily interested in just print and just disseminating, which is a marketing decision. I beg your pardon? Yeah. That's a power outage, I'm screwed. So that's how most of these are created. In this one you can kind of see that, this is a volcanic peak, it's Mount Rainier, and you can kind of see the topography behind it. And then I play with the colors. So, because initially I wanted to work directly on topographical maps, but that's limited. It's limited in scale and it's limited in color. And so pretty quickly I decided, I'll go digital. These are some of the ideas I've been playing with. These are not images that are here. I specifically chose different ones. And they're of travels that I've taken, specific photographs I've taken. And I too play around a little bit with the idea of glitches, which to me reflects partly on the idea of landscape and environment. We've fragmented our landscape as human beings. So the idea of creating glitches goes very well with kind of an environmental ethic that I have in my head. And I believe that's it. You'll be happy to know. Thank you. We'll do the questions. I don't know if I'll have answers.
George, when you start something, do you already have in mind what you're looking for, what your end result you want to be? Or is it just something that develops out of your playing, like you said?
Both. I have an issue with, like, there's 1,000 management books out there that say, set goals. I don't set goals. I set vague directions that might be interpreted as a vague kind of goal. I have an idea, and I want to move towards that idea. I feel that the process of engagement, I touched on process before, I feel that the process of engagement should allow you to adapt, so that I try something like this, it's not working, let's try it like this. I teach a design class, and one of the things I tell them is that the human species, its main thing of survivability is adaptability. I tell them that, okay, your idea, when you have an idea in your head, it's a pure thing. You haven't materialized it, it's pure, it's perfect, it's in your head. The analogy or the metaphor I use is that, okay, your idea is to get across this river, okay? And there's a number of stepping stones, and you're like, okay, I can get across this river, and you pick a particular tree across the river and say, that's where I'm gonna get to. And you're starting to go on the stepping stones, right? But you're finding that the stepping stones aren't taking you to the tree, they're taking you somewhere else, you know? So that process of engaging with the stepping stones is not leading you into the tree. If you're really kind of married to the goal of that tree, you're gonna be frustrated. You just have to step back to say, no, I'm married to the idea of getting across the damn river. Screw the tree, you know, that's irrelevant, you know? So the idea of engaging with the stones to get you farther, to get you across, is more the process I'm interested in. So I have general ideas of what I want to solve, which direction I want to go to, and then I let working with the materials define how I'm going to get there. It's the longest answer to a good question. Yes, sir.
These pictures you have shown, the latest ones that you have done.
Yes.
What medium do they represent? Are they oil paintings or acrylics or what?
No, they're pure digital. They're pure digital, so they get printed. So for example, like the 4 things there, it's ink, gets printed through a printer. I'm not trying to recreate the sense of, let's say, an oil painting or a watercolor.
Do you have duplicates of them?
I make it unique. I don't want to do the same thing twice. Right. I want to make them unique. So I might take the same image and play around with it, change the colors, change the proportions, and the digital tools allow me to do that.
Do you not consider yourself a digital artist?
Well, it's probably not fair to the people that are really more deeply immersed in it. I'm using it to create images right now, but I'm not using it as a reflection or social commentary. The depths of the tool itself, I'm not using to explore that. Does that make sense? So, for example, Guy Vincent is using the tools to reflect on the tools and disseminating all at the same time. So I feel that that's a little bit more immersive. So it's not a false modesty thing. I'm using it for my own purposes, but to me it's just another tool in the toolbox, just like a brush or a pencil or something else.
I'm wondering about your presentation style, like not just the picture, but the frame. Because could you comment on the wood backings?
The presentation I've found is very much a part of the work. For these 2 pieces, which are both drawing, they're ink and hand-ground maple charcoal. I cut down trees, I burn them in my wood-burning stove, which is going right now. It takes some bigger pieces that didn't burn, grind it up, and then use that. So for example, in the upper one, the sky area is all charcoal dust that I'm painting with a brush. And then the mountain part of it is done with like pen and ink. I like the idea of paper, the fragile nature of paper. It's a very organic material. That's why they're mounted the way they are too, with the tacks puncturing the paper, kind of demonstrating its vulnerability, why the edges are torn. And in contrast to that, I like the steel frame that's, you know, pretty tough and unforgiving and human-made, that shows a kind of strength. So I like the dichotomy, the contrast between those two things. For the wood pieces, one of the things, you know, I talked about topography. Well, I find that wood grain is a kind of a topography. It shows the life of a tree, you know, like a tree ring. And when you have a wood panel, it has markings that are very much like a topographical map. Both paper, wood, you know, they have a strong organic quality, and the specific patterns of the wood, I feel, relate to the images.
In your curriculum vitae, you list a lot of commissioned
Yes.
works and projects. For example, one of the last one was in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
Could you explain how that comes about?
In that one, I was lucky. I was asked specifically. In others, I present a proposal or I present my work, and others make a decision, you know, that may or may not include me. That was through a designer who was familiar with my work. She also gave me carte blanche in the sense that she gave me the specs of the dimensions of the spaces. It's 12 canvases, so she gave me specific locations. She sent me the blueprint images and so on and so forth. And then we communicated. You know, I would send her maquettes, like sketches of what the images would be like, and we just went from there.
Which hotel was it in?
Ritz-Carlton, Grand Canal, Abu Dhabi. Any other questions? Because I know there's like goodies over there, and there's... Thank you very much for everybody's attention.